Actress and The View co-host Whoopi Goldberg want to see folks like Tucker Carlson and a handful of other personalities at Fox News prosecuted by the Justice Department over her claiming that they are recruiting terrorists. My name's Greg Hoyt, and we're going to go ahead and take a dive into these outrageous claims here on The Breakdown. Hey, this is Greg Hoyt from The Breakdown. If you're new here and checking out the channel on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitter at GregHoytLET. Anyway, let's get on to the video. So on the March 7th episode of The View, Whoopi Goldberg and some of her co-hosts suggested, well, not even suggested, at least Whoopi Goldberg, outright asserted that it should happen. But, the other co-hosts kind of concurred that, Fox News hosts like Tucker Carlson and the ilk should be investigated and possibly prosecuted by the Justice Department based upon some of the new revelations associated with the ongoing lawsuit between Dominion and Fox News. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the Dominion lawsuit that's going on, basically Dominion is claiming that Fox News and their hosts defamed the voting machine company during the coverage of the 2020 election and, the weeks and months following thereafter, based upon, Fox News hosts and some of the guests that came onto the show that either implied or inferred that there was something awry with the voting machines that led to the 2020 election, rendering illegitimate outcomes. Now, whether or not, Fox News legitimately defamed Dominion, that's for the courts to decide. And, there is a lot of information to pour over for that. And for all we know, Fox News or one of the hosts or one of their guests could have said something that meets the legal bar associated with, libel, slander, the things that are taken into consideration in defamation suits. But that is a matter for the civil courts to determine. When it comes to the Department of Justice, they really have no dog in this fight because, you can't really criminally prosecute folks for matters of libel and slander. That's why the civil courts exist, to tackle those things. For those curious about the ongoing Dominion suit with Fox News and they want to take a look at some of the newest exhibits that have been released, I'll drop a link in the description, so that way, if you're curious and you want to check them out and kind of get up to date on some of the newest exhibits, you can go ahead and do that. But as stated earlier, Whoopi Goldberg, along with some of her cohorts on The View during the March 7th episode, Whoopi kind of led the charge, suggesting that Fox News, and by proxy their hosts, should be investigated by the DOJ because she believes that the coverage brought forth by the network during the period of the 2020 election was tantamount to recruiting domestic terrorists.
I have a question. How come this is not thought of as being recruiting? How come they're not thinking about this as radicalizing? Why is this not being scrutinized the way that they scrutinize other things? Because to me, this should be against the law. You should not be able to lie to the American knowingly. And, it's one thing if you made a mistake and you didn't know, but we heard for 5 or 6 years how, the media was lying, sackadoo. They were fake news. They were this. So how come? What do we do as Americans to say this is not okay?
Whoopi, you just said something I don't think I've ever heard on television.
No, rarely.
About domestic terrorism.
Yes.
Because you had the FBI director, Chris Wray, say the #1 threat to our country, to the survival of our democracy, is domestic terrorism.
So there are a couple of glaring issues related to these assertions made by Goldberg during this segment on The View. The first and most obvious one being that somehow Fox News and their opinion slingers and pundits or what have you, somehow Fox News, through the course of their 2020 election coverage, was engaged in recruiting for domestic terrorism. I mean, that claim, that belief, that claim, that's absurd on its face. Which again, this is kind of funny. It's kind of ironic that, Whoopi Goldberg is, throwing a tantrum about what she believes to be misleading or untrue coverage done by news outlets and opinion and infotainment shows, because she's claiming that what Fox News did could be construed as recruiting for domestic terrorists. Pundits and talk show hosts, much like Whoopi Goldberg, they are afforded the same generous leeways as the rest of Americans when it pertains to the First Amendment and its protections. And the mere discussing of topical news matters, even when they're interlaced with opinion, is in no way tantamount to recruiting domestic terrorists. I mean, it's silly that it has to be spelled out like this because you've got idiots like Whoopi Goldberg claiming that, what Fox News did during the 2020 coverage was somehow recruiting domestic terrorists. The fact of the matter is, in order to be arrested and prosecuted for, recruiting for domestic terrorism, a person or a group or an entity would have to be literally caught in the act of recruiting for a very specific terroristic cause or act. They would have to be actively seeking out individuals, recruiting them, so on and so forth, to partake in a terrorist act or series of activities. But news punditry, opinion pieces on TV shows, that's not recruiting for domestic terrorism. Now, the second glaring issue with Whoopi Goldberg's comments in that last segment is her assertion that the First Amendment does not afford protections for people to lie about things. On the contrary, the First Amendment generally protects a myriad of instances where people can lie or mislead others, with there being, limited exceptions for, like, let's say, various forms of fraud. For instance, like if you intentionally render false information on an official or government document, that's an instance where, lying can get you in legal trouble. And of course, there's also things like libel and slander, which are lies, but those are handled through the civil courts. They're not handled through the criminal courts. Therefore, the Department of Justice is not going to get their hands involved in it. But again, aside from, very small exceptions, lying is generally protected, even if the lying is done by news outlets. You see, when it comes to news outlets, especially ones that are heavily centered around infotainment or opinion commentary shows, those types of outlets, those types of programs are generally allowed to outright mislead their viewers on any number of topics, or they can also allow the outlet's collective bias to, frame a story in a particular way, a fashion, or a light. And again, those aren't prosecutable offenses, and it's certainly not recruiting for domestic terrorism. Now, Whoopi Goldberg can certainly hope and wish and, pray to her respective deity that, she hopes Fox News and, others in the infotainment business get arrested for, spreading what she believes to be, misinformation or what have you. But the fact of the matter is, she can hope and pray all she wants. It's just not against the law, and the Department of Justice isn't going to get involved. But, of course, that did not stop Whoopi Goldberg from circling back a few minutes later on the same episode, doing the same song and dance, giving the same routine, with her saying that, she really hopes that the Department of Justice will look into Fox News because of their 2020 election coverage, where the outlet, reported on topical matters and topical concerns.
As I was saying earlier, you can make a mistake and say something. It happens. And people say, oh, no, that wasn't right. But you knew. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You knew. And people are still listening to you, and you're still lying. And I hope that the DOJ looks through a whole bunch of stuff and figures out
listening.
what to do about this. Because I know if this were happening here on ABC or CBS or Element of P.
Yeah, Disney would do it, though.
We could not do this.
Again, and at this point I feel like I'm beating a dead horse. No matter what Whoopi Goldberg thinks, the Department of Justice is not going to do anything. Nor could they do anything if they wanted to, because there is no arrestable offense here when it comes to news punditry and, opinion programs, infotainment. Sorry, it just doesn't work like that. Just because people spread opinions or what you perceive to be misinformation on news outlets or opinion programs, you can't get arrested for that. It's not illegal. But what is genuinely unsettling in all of this is the fact that Whoopi Goldberg and some of her cohorts on The View, they really do. They really do want to see people arrested for wrongthink. They want to see their political opponents, their political adversaries, thrown in jail because they espoused opinions on matters that, folks like Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and all the few folks, since they don't like their opinions, they want to see them jailed for them. That's concerning. That is deeply unsettling. Like, don't get me wrong, I think The View is hot garbage in terms of a show. I think, their takes are horrible. I don't even know why it is a program, but I wouldn't, wish any of them to get arrested just because they say ostensibly some of the dumbest shit on, morning television. But yet, these folks, these women on the show, they want to see the folks at Fox News arrested, doing time in jail and prison for espousing opinions and takes that they don't like. Anyways, guys, that's pretty much the long and short of it. Go ahead and drop your comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on this whole matter, whether you agree with the hosts of The View or whether you think they're just being wild and out of control, or if you kind of find the irony in them, espousing these hyperbolic and wild takes while making claims, that, the First Amendment doesn't protect lying. My name's Greg Hoyt, and that was The Breakdown. Peace.